Yay!
All right, we're live. That was exciting.
That was it. Here we are, broadcasting to the universe.
Oh yeah.
Hello out there.
Welcome
Hello.
everyone
All
who
7
is
people.
joining us.
8.
All. It is Friday.
Yes.
Good things.
For those of you who are joining us, we're just going to wait a little bit and let people kind of trickle in so everyone gets the bulk of the instructions and
Gets the intro and
yeah.
all of it. All the fun stuff. Those of you that are joining us, we want to welcome you and say happy Friday. If it is indeed Friday for you, maybe where you are, it is not Friday. I'm not entirely convinced that it's Friday for me anymore, so
Tell me about it.
anything's possible.
In fact, I think I gauge what day it is based off of these webinars.
Yeah.
So thanks for always having them on the same day.
We got a question already. Philip, will we be getting the email for the recording on USB TM Pro as a DAW interface? You will indeed be getting that, actually. I'm not sure why that hasn't gone out. I will look into that immediately following this broadcast. So yes, Philip, to answer your question, you will be getting that hopefully today. And if you participated in Tuesday's webinar dealing with channel groups, that'll be going out as well very shortly. So keep an eye out for both of those.
In fact, I think it's just even if you registered. So even if you didn't attend, you still
exactly.
get it. Cool.
We send the email out to all who registered, regardless of attendance.
So that's a good point for future ones. If you guys can't make a webinar, you can still register for it and get the recording.
That's right.
So you'll see it in the future.
Exactly. You watch it on your own time.
Yeah.
If you can't, for whatever reason, you can't catch us live and in person, watch the instant replay.
Thank you, Michael. Yeah, it's pretty cool, huh?
Nice. Wonder Woman. Solid.
Love that movie.
Yeah, it was good. The second one's
good.
coming out probably
Oh, so excited.
sometime.
Yeah, maybe DC will get another one right.
Yeah.
Um,
All right. Shall we
yeah.
commence with the intros and whatnot?
Yeah. So welcome everyone who is here. My name is Jacob. I am the training coordinator at QSC, and I'm just going to be helping to moderate the webinar. So you won't hear a ton from me, but you will hear a lot from Jason. And Golden and Stu are going to be helping him out, answering a lot of your questions. So if you guys want to say hi.
Hey.
It's going.
And questions, that's a good point to bring up. So you guys are welcome to ask any questions that you want. Just go ahead and pop them into the Q&A. The chat's not going to be open. It can get kind of hectic if we leave that open. So we want everything to kind of filter through Q&A, and then we're going to answer every question that we can. If we don't get to your question during the Q&A, during the webinar, don't worry, it gets cataloged and we'll be able to answer it afterwards. But we'll try to get to as many as we can. You also have the ability to raise your hand. There's like a little button next to your name where you can raise your hand and kind of signify that you want to ask a question. But we are going to request that if you do that, you still put your question in the Q&A. That way we know how the best way to answer it. And we do request also that you stick to the topics that are at hand. We don't want to get too sidetracked, or else this hour-long webinar becomes a 2-3 hour webinar, and nobody's got time for that. So at least not today.
Not today.
So please try to stick to the topic at hand, and any kind of tech questions that you have, or anything that's off topic, go ahead and we'll email. Do you have that slide up, Jason? Let me. Oh,
I do. Yep.
There we go. Cool. So there's the information for our tech support. So if you do have any questions that are unrelated, you can go ahead and email or visit that contact page.
Very good. All right. I think that about covers it. A couple of other things before we get going here. Well, the topic for today is advanced mixing workflow features. So it's sort of a hodgepodge lesson. I'm going to be going through and hitting on a number of different features that are in the mixer that don't really get brought to light a whole lot, and some of you might not even know they exist. So I'm going to talk about that and hopefully shine some light on some of this stuff for you guys and give you guys some good ideas on some alternate or advanced ways that you can kind of use these tools in your workflow to make your job easier. In the past, we've done kind of a combination of different ways of utilizing audio. I'm usually running tracks, and I have a stream of my mixer that goes out, and we also give you guys the ability to download the same tracks that I'm working with, as well as some scenes and things like that, so you can follow along. This lesson isn't going to have a whole lot of audio play, if any, so I'm not going to do the mixer stream, and if you do have tracks, feel free to take advantage of the use of those on your own time and things like that. But for this lesson, we're really not going to be working with a whole lot of audio. I'm just going to be kind of diving into some of these tools on the mixer and kind of highlighting them. So yeah, that is that. So just to get us going here, as I said, there are a whole lot of tools as well as functions on TouchMix that can simplify your job as a mix engineer. Whether you're mixing from front of house, or you're mixing on the side of the stage doing monitors, or if you're a performer yourself and you're mixing your own sound or your own sound for your band or your group, there's again some tools in here that will allow you to operate the mixer a little bit more efficiently and effectively. So I'm going to go through and unpack these things. I'm going to show you how to access them, explain what they are and how they work, and when and why you might use them. So let's go ahead and just get right into it. The first thing I'm going to cover here is the copy and paste feature. This might be something that you are aware of. If not, I'm going to go ahead and talk about it. The cool thing about this is that it is a dynamic feature. It's a sort of what you see is what you get. So it'll copy multiple things and keep multiple various items within its clipboard or its queue. And it all has to do with what you're looking at. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll switch over to my mixer view here so we can start talking about this. So anything you're looking at on the screen at any given time can be copied and then pasted to another like screen. So for instance, I can copy an entire mix, or I can copy an EQ screen on an input, as well as a graphic EQ on my output. And I can, every time I hit the copy button on any different screen, it's retaining all of that information. And then when I move to another similar screen, it will copy that to that screen, which can be really handy. And that nature of it really elevates the workflow of using this tool. So you don't have to be going and copying each thing and then going back and pasting it before you can copy the next thing. So as a quick demonstration here, I'll go ahead and punch into just an input channel in my input 1 here. And if I hit copy, and just to let you know, we're going to talk about user buttons next, but I'm going to bounce out a little bit for a second. Copy and paste is defaulted to some of your user buttons. On the TouchMix 30, which is what I'm using here today, it is U7 and U8, which are going to be up at the top here. So you do have your 4 around the wheel, and then an additional 4 up at the very top of the button cluster there. So U7 and U8 are the default user buttons that assigned to the copy and paste feature. If you're using the TouchMix 8 or the 16, this is going to be U2 and U3. So U2 and U3 above the wheel here will be copy and paste respectively. So I'm going to go ahead and just hit copy on my EQ screen. And then I'll just go to my compressor screen. Actually, let's make this a little more exciting. I'll make an actual curve there. And I'll set some compressor settings here. I'm going to go back, I'll copy this again. And I'll go to my compressor and I'll copy that again. Now watch, if I go to the next channel, so I'm in input 2 now, on my compressor screen, if I hit paste, there we go, and then I go back to my EQ screen and I hit paste one more time, there we go. So just like that, I've copied 2 different parameters from one channel, gone to the next channel, and copied those same parameters to that channel. Additionally, I can do something else. If I go into input 3, I'm going to make some changes to my input 3 here. I'm just going to make up a wild EQ curve. I'll engage some compressor settings here. Maybe I'll also give ourselves a little bit of a gate. Oh, that might not be very applicable. I can even give myself some effects, give myself some delay and reverb. And if I go to the overview screen now, with all of those parameters configured, if I want to simply copy the entire channel strip configuration and paste that to another channel, from my overview screen, all I have to do is hit paste here, go to another channel, sorry, hit copy there, go to another channel and hit paste, and it copies all of the channel configuration. So you can go and copy individual page parameters like my EQ or my compressor and paste those on other light screens. Or if I want to grab the entire channel setup, copying the overview screen will allow you to paste the entire channel setup to another channel. And likewise, I haven't cleared my clipboard at all yet. I haven't cleared the cache for my copy. So it is holding all of these things. It is retaining all of these things throughout it. And if now on my output screen here, if I build myself some sort of a, again, I'm just randomly spinning knobs here just to demonstrate this. If I hit copy here on my main output graphic EQ and go into an auxiliary, I go into this screen, I hit paste, boom, there we go. So that shows you kind of what this is capable of. And I can even do something like this. If I go back out to my mix, my main mix, and at this point I'll punch in a little closer, get the idea of the buttons. You know, if I were to dial in a fader mix here, just get some things going real quick. I'm going to go throughout my entire mix. You can guess what's about to happen. But I'll just dial up some faders so we can see this all happening. So you can see our full complete mix. All right, so here is 24 channels. And you can see that reflected in my mini fader representations in my navigation strip there. Now, if I hit copy here, it's going to copy my entire fader mix, and I can go back into my aux1, and I can hit paste here, and there you go. So it has pasted my entire fader mix into an auxiliary. So again, anything you're looking at on the screen, it can be as great as an entire mix, or it can be as small as, you know, a single EQ page or compressor page, things like that. So anything you're looking at will be copied. And it's pretty dynamic. So it's really nice to utilize this when you're quickly trying to set up and configure a whole lot of channels or even a number of mixes. You could even use this feature that I just showed you, copying your main mix to an aux, just to give yourself a nice starting point in your auxes. If you don't want to have to spin up every single fader, you know, copy your main mix, paste it in an aux, and then fine tune it from there. You can shave a few minutes off of your program time here. And either way you look at it, even if you're copying channel settings in and out of each other, you know, just having an initial starting point, or if you know, like, I really like the way this is set up, I'm going to throw it over here as well, and I know it's going to work. You know, that just saves you a lot of time being able to just copy and paste it versus having to manually dial everything in a number of times. The last thing I want to point out on this feature here is when you are using this, when you're done using it, typically you're more than likely going to be using the copy and paste feature during the setup, you know, before your event begins. When you're finished with your initial setup and when you move into kind of showtime, it's a really good idea to come into the menu, and in the clear section here, you hit clear copy and paste, and that's going to clear the entire copy and paste cache. So that way, you don't accidentally end up in a situation where you're working on the board during an active mix in real time with live audio. You go into a channel and maybe you accidentally hit that paste button on a screen, and it's going to paste whatever the last thing that was copied from that screen onto that page now, and then you've lost whatever settings you had. There's no Control Z on this feature. There's no undo. So that could potentially hose you pretty bad if you did that. So it's a good idea to make sure you clear that out before your event starts. All we do is hit that, and then we confirm it. And now everything's cleared. So if I were to go back into here, if I were to go into aux2 now and hit the paste button, you can see there we go. Paste not available because I've cleared out that cache, and so there's nothing available to copy. There's no information that it is holding to be copied. So that one's pretty good, the copy and paste feature. I personally use that one a whole lot, as well as what I'm going to get into next, which is the actual user buttons themselves. So we've seen, you know, copy and paste. That function is a user button function. I mean, it has a default setting that we've given it. That can be changed, however, if you want to, you know, move the copy and paste feature to different user buttons, or if you aren't going to use that and you want to utilize those user buttons for something different, or if you want to configure any of your user buttons to do any number of things. So the user buttons can do just about anything you can think of on the mixer. And it is exactly what the name implies. It is a user configured button. So to set these up, I'm going to go into the menu, and we're going to select user buttons on the screen right there. I'll show you that one more time. Back out from the mix screen, I'm going to hit menu and user buttons. Now we are in the user button configuration screen. And again, just to reiterate, the TouchMix 30 here does have 8 physical user buttons on the mixer here, while the TouchMix 8 and 16 are going to have these 4 around the wheel. However, if you're using the app with a tablet, either Android or iOS, there is an additional 4 user buttons in the app. So there you have 4 soft user buttons in the app. So if you are using a tablet, you do have the ability to utilize up to 8 user buttons still on the 8 and 16. And this is how you configure them. Just to start us off, let's go ahead and take a look at what the default settings are, because they do come pre-configured with some default settings. They're not just blank buttons when you take it out of the box. And it's good to know what these do. So default, user 1 and user 4. So the outer guys here, so U1 and U4 around the wheel, those guys are navigation. They are nav left and nav right. So just to demonstrate that, if I go out to my mix screen again, and if I select a fader, and if I start pressing U4, you can see that it starts kind of just scrolling through my different faders, and then U1 will go the other way. Likewise, if I go into a channel, if I go to my EQ screen and I start selecting controls here, as I hit U4, it's just going to kind of step me through each of my parameters there. So I can use those as navigation tools, physical navigation tools. And so that is the default setting of those user buttons. Going back into our user button menu here, U2 and U3 on the TouchMix 30 are default to clear clip and clear cue. On the 8 and 16, this is different. On the 8 and 16, those are going to be defaulted to copy and paste. So we've given you that feature as opposed to these clear options on the TouchMix 30. Again, you can reconfigure those, and I'm going to show you how to do that in a minute. But just to give you an idea, the clip button, the clear clip button, so if you're out here in your mix button, your mini fader representations in your nav strip there are going to light up red if any of the channels are clipped. So the corresponding channel in your mini fader representation will turn red in there to indicate that you have clipped that channel. The way to clear that, to clip all of your indicators there, is to come into menu and hit this clip clear button, clear clip in here. So we've actually we've assigned that feature to a user button, U2 on the TouchMix 30. So instead of having to come into the menu right from your mix screen, you don't have to leave your fader screen, you can hit U2 and it will clear those clips indicators out for you. Likewise, U3 has been assigned to the clear cue option. And we're going to talk about cue in a little bit as well. But the cue are these buttons here. I'll punch in a little closer. So right at the top of every fader, inputs and outputs, you'll see this button called cue. And essentially what that does, whoops, missed it, is it sends that channel to your cue system, which is a way that you can monitor your mixer either on headphones or through a pair of small profile monitors or something like that. So it's just going to direct your audio here to your cue output, and so you can listen to what's happening on that channel or those number of channels. If you start to build up a whole number of different things that you're queuing and you want to just wipe all that out, you can come into the menu and then you hit the clear cue, and that undoes all of your cue assignments. On the TouchMix 30 here, we have assigned that to user 3. So you have those all kind of pre-configured to do those things. User 5 and 6, the first 2 that are up on the second row of 4 above the buttons here, are assigned to recording controls, so recording transport controls. If you're recording to USB, you're going to be looking at this screen here. There you go. And so a number of these controls have been pre-assigned to U5 and U6, primarily record and play. So record/stop and play/stop. If we look at that again, you'll see that indicated there. Play stop and record stop is 5 and 6. So you can use these buttons as hard buttons to start the recording and stop the recording, and then play back the recording and stop the playback, respectively, which can be really handy if you're running a recording and you need to be kind of stopping and starting throughout the event. You may be per song or per speech or per lecture or per however you're segmenting your recordings. Putting those on some user buttons can be really handy, so you don't have to come into the screen every time you need to activate those controls. And then finally, on the TouchMix 8, users 7 and 8 are copy and paste. So let's go ahead and we'll take a look at how to configure these differently if we wanted to do that, and take a look at some of the other options that we have. Starting from the top here, so this menu, if you're familiar with our presets and scenes menus and the effects wizard and things like that, we've kind of got this 3 menu option here where you kind of work from left to right and kind of figure out and choose the right option that you're looking for. So the first column here is called action, and this is all your general categories of your different types of assignments that you can make. Starting at the top, we have recall input presets. And so what this will do is if I select this, you'll see here in the selection bank, all of my user presets. So if you've saved any custom presets, that will show up here. That will look inside of that menu. It doesn't allow you to choose or recall any of our factory settings, but if you have saved and set up some user presets, you can use a user button to assign those to any one of your channels. So you can choose the preset, in this menu here, and then you can choose which channel you want that to be assigned to here, and then assign it. And so now you have a button that will recall a specific preset into a specific channel at the touch of the button. So that can be very handy. And we have recall output presets as well, which is the same thing for our output. So if you had saved any presets, any custom presets, for your output, you can do the same thing there. You can assign that to your user button and recall that processing or that preset on any one of your outputs, your main and any one of your auxes. All right. We also have the ability to recall scenes. This can be very advantageous. And with this option, we do give you the ability to recall any of our factory scenes. So within the scenes menu, we can go in there real quick and take a look at this. So here are the scenes menu. This is where I can recall scenes. And a scene, just real quickly, is basically a snapshot, a global snapshot of the complete configuration of the mixer. So you can save the entire setup in a scene and then be able to recall that and recall the mixer into those configurations at any time. And we do have a number of factory scenes here, which are really, really useful. They're kind of broken down by various broad applications, and it will just configure the mixer with presets and channel assignments and things like that to kind of just get you going really quickly. And then, of course, you can save any number of your own scenes in there as well. And so one of the user button options is to be able to recall any of those that you need to. So I have my factory options here and my user options there. And so I can make any assignment I want to any of my available user buttons and be able to recall scenes. The last option here is probably, in my personal opinion, the most advantageous to this feature. If I select a relative in the middle selection bank here, it gives me the option to assign either next scene or previous scene to user buttons. So this gives me the option to simply scroll through different scenes. So if I've set up a number of scenes that I know I'm going to have to punch throughout an event, I can set that up on a user button. So as the event moves forward, as I need to be hitting and hitting those scene changes and swapping out different scenes, I just hit whatever my user button is on the mixer, and it's going to recall each scene as I press the button. And you can go either way if you need to. You can set up one button for previous and one button for next. So if you need to go back and forth, if you want the option to go back and forth, you can utilize 2 user buttons and get that functionality going. So that's a really handy one. And then next I have mute. So I can activate any of my mute options on the mixer, anywhere from any of my input mutes to output mutes to any of my groups. So if you participated in the groups one this last Tuesday, this should be familiar to you. Or if you're already familiar with channel groups, we have DCAs, so I can activate any of my DCA mutes. That way I can activate any of my effects outputs, my effects masters here. So if I go back out to my mix, we're talking about these. So our effects master channels there. I can engage any of those mutes I want to with a user button. And then the last option here is activating actual mute groups, which is here. These are our mute groups. We have 8 mute groups. No. Hear the fire truck? Sorry, whoever that's for. There we go. So I can activate any of my mute groups. And then this option here is pretty nice, effects mute. So there is a dedicated effects mute button on the mixer already, which is located right here. So if I want to press that, it'll automatically mute all of my effects masters. Handy to know about in and of itself. That option is available on a user button. However, it already is on the mixer, so that one might be less likely to be used unless you are using an iPad. If you're not, at the board, actually cancel that. You have the effects mute on the iPad control anyway. So this option here is actually going to become more advantageous when we talk about MIDI in just a minute here, but that is there as an option. I can use the user buttons as navigation tools. So I can select my go-to screen option here. Let's get a little closer so you can read that. And then it'll give me different options to navigate to different screens on the mixer and even select different faders and things like that. So I can go to input screens on any of my inputs there. I can go to compressor screens on any of my inputs. I've got output options, EQ, any of the filter options, the limiter, auxes, and effects. And if you select other, I have a couple of other really nice screens here, including all of my wizard screens and my DCA fader overview screen and my home, which is already assigned to a home button, so it would be a little redundant. And also the auto mix button. So if you're using the auto mixer, if you're running a speech application or a town hall meeting or something like that, and you're using the auto mixer, which is out here in the menu, it's really nice to be able to get to it at any point on a physical user button. So that option is in there as well. We've already talked about some of the recording options, but just to show you the rest of them. So we do have our defaults on the 30 here set up to play stop and record stop, but I can do other things such as load sessions. So if I've got multiple recording sessions loaded up on a hard drive that's connected, I can assign a user button to select any of those at any time. In my transport control options, I have my play and record stop. I have my hard stop button. I have RTZ, which is return to zero, which is going to be on that screen. This button here, that hard back arrow, which is going to reset your timeline back to zero. That is return to zero. So RTZ is the acronym for that. I can assign a user button to do that on my recording button. I can also set user buttons for the set locate and go to locate, which are these here. So you have your playhead and you have a locate option, and you have these two buttons here, set and go to, which will activate different jump controls or snap controls. So the playhead or the locator will snap to the position of one or the other based on the button that you hit there. And you have the option of assigning that to user buttons. And then we have do for all tracks, which is my personal favorite here. If you're doing recording, you're aware that you do need to come in here and arm all of your channels that you want to record before you record, right? And then to play those back, all of these channels need to be unarmed and then set to track, which if you're doing a high channel count can be a little tedious. So you have the option of assigning a user button to both of those functions. So I'm just gonna actually start with this because this is a fun demonstration. I'm gonna assign my user one, instead of the navigation option, I'm gonna assign it to arm all tracks, and then I'm gonna set my U4 to track all tracks. So to make this assignment, I'm gonna have my user button selected here. So I have my different tabs here, which navigates through my 8 available user buttons. So I know I want U1 to do this function. So on my menu, I've selected that function here. I've got toggle arm. I'm simply gonna hit this green assign button at the top and confirm it. And now in the name here, we see toggle all arm, and the tab itself actually also reflects the name toggle all arm. So now this button, if I go back to my play or my record play screen, if I hit U1, all of my channels automatically are set to arm. So that's a huge time saver instead of having to punch through each and every one of them. And then on the inverse of that, if I go back into user buttons and I say user button 4, I want that to record, do for all tracks, mic track, assign, confirm. I've seen the name change there. So if I go back into my screen here and I hit U4, now it automatically unarms and tracks all of my channels. So if I'm doing recording and I need to be kind of arming things and then listening back quickly, I can use those options on 2 different user buttons to very quickly arm everything and then track everything so that I can be recording and playing back. So it's very, very useful for that one. I personally use that one a lot. Moving on, I've got some select options, which are handy. So this essentially allows you to assign a fader to a user button. So if you just want to select a specific fader, I can assign it to a user button and it'll grab that fader. And I can do this to inputs, outputs, DCA faders, effects faders. I can even select the pan control of any specific input. So if I don't want the actual level fader on a channel, I want to grab the pan control, which is here, right under that Q button. You have a pan, so if I select that and I can use the wheel to slide that left or right, you can assign that to the selection of that to user button. I mean, this is one that I actually use often. I'll give you just a little personal anecdote here. I play drums in a cover band, and I actually use a TouchMix 16 in our rehearsal space. And I have got, usually I'm playing on an electronic kit, but if I'm playing on an acoustic kit, I'll have a kick mic and a snare mic and a single overhead. Otherwise, it's just the stereo from the drum module in. Regardless, I'm using 2 or 3 channels for myself. And then we have 4 singers. So we have 2 lead singers that kind of take turns between songs, taking lead and then backup. And then our bass player and our lead guitar player also sing backup. So we've got 4 vocal mics that are open in the room. So it's me, the 4 vocal mics, and we have a keyboardist that goes through the PA as well. And then the bass amplifier and guitar amplifiers are just live in the room. They're not going through the PA. But I'll set up groups, DCA groups for my drum channels and the mic channels. And then I'll usually have one or both of the lead singer's mics assigned as well. So I'll assign, 1 or 2 of the lead singer mics to different user buttons. I'll assign the DCA fader for my little drum channel count and the overall channel count for all of the vocal mics all in one group, all in one DCA fader. So I've got 4 user buttons, and I can select any of those things I need to while playing drums. I can reach over with a stick still in my hand without breaking my beat, without breaking my groove. I can select what I need to adjust with a button on a physical button, and then I can grab the wheel. I don't even have to interface with the screen at all. I can do this with a stick in my hand while I'm playing. And so, as the night goes on and the guitar and the bass amps just kind of magically get louder and louder after each song, I can hit, Jason's DCA group and Jason gets louder too, and the vocals get louder and whatever I need to do. So that's a really useful feature, I think. Just wanted to share that with you. So that is your selection options. And now we have a couple of really interesting options. We have utility here. Utility gives me the ability to assign my nav. So the default settings of U1 and 4, which we discussed, is nav left and nav right. That is where we find those assignments if we wanted to reset those at any point. I'm going to talk about those other 2 options in a minute. And then we have clear options. So again, on the defaults here, we have clip clear and cue clear as options that were defaulted here. This is where you would find those. We also have our mutes and then reset the selected channel, which is pretty nice. So our mute options, again, you can assign a user button to just basically clear out all of the mutes that might be engaged on the board at any given time. And then our reset channel option basically allows you to select a channel on the screen and hit that user button that you've assigned that to reset that channel, and it'll reassign that channel to its default factory settings. So you can just clear out channel assignments with a user button, which can be really handy depending on your workflow. I can disable or enable my pitch correct feature. So in the effects channel in the effects page for every channel, there is a pitch correct option. So the pitch correction tool can only be used on a single channel at any given time. It's not kind of a globally used, or it is a globally thing versus a discrete effect here. So you want to use this more usually like on a vocal channel. If you've got a backup vocalist as a little pitch or something like that, you can apply a little bit of pitch correction to them in the board on that channel. And there is an enable button here, which allows you to turn that feature on and off. You can assign that to a user button. So if you want to be toggling that pitch correction on and off throughout the performance, maybe you don't always need it on, but every now and then you kind of just, you turn it on to give them a little bit of help. You have the option to do that with a user button. And then under miscellaneous, there is our copy and paste. So there you go. So that is how you can assign the copy and paste feature to different buttons, or if you need to get back to your copy and paste, if you've reassigned the copy and paste button to something else and you want to get them back to their default settings, you can find that here. Also, at any point, if you want to reset a user button to its factory assignments, there is a dedicated reset button here. So I'll go ahead and reset my U1 and 4 just to show you that. I'll hit reset. Boom, and that goes back to my nav right. And then I reset my U1, and that goes back to my nav left. So it's easy as that. Now, before we move on, I do want to talk about these two options here, these fader to zero and fader off. And I'm going to correlate these with the zero button. So if I punch out a little bit, you have a zero button right here at noon, 12 o'clock, right above the wheel is that zero button indicated with the lovely zero. What this button does is that at any point I can come in here and I can select a channel, and if I hit zero button, it automatically pulls that fader all the way down. Here we go. So that in and of itself is really useful to know if I just need to be clearing out channels. Now on an output, however, so if I select any of my inputs, you can see it's going to go all the way down. On an output, if I spin my main output all the way down and hit zero, it does the opposite. It brings it to unity. Okay, so inputs and outputs work in opposition. So output goes to unity, input goes to down, all the way off. If I want to create the inversion of those on user buttons, that's what those assignments are. So fader to zero is essentially unity. So if I want the ability to take any of my inputs to unity, like snap them right to unity instead of having to dial them up, I can make that assignment. I'm going to do that on my U1 right now. I'm going to reassign U1 to fader to zero. And fader off is the opposite. So fader off takes that fader off. It takes it all the way out. So if I assign that to my U4, oops, there we go. Assign. Here we go. Now that's been assigned. So now if I go back out to my mix screen, if I select a channel and hit U1, that snaps to unity. Okay. And likewise on the output, if I grab my output here and hit U4, that snaps all the way off. So now I've created an inversion of my zero button if I need that functionality on my inputs or my outputs instead of what the zero button will natively do or naturally do. This option here, sending my faders to unity, is really advantageous if I am setting up a aux to sort of a mirror of the main mix. You can do that. I'll talk about that very briefly. But anytime you are resetting your aux pickoffs here to post fader, that means that the actual main mix faders will affect the level of those channels within that aux now. So the pickoff point of the signal from your channels going to that aux is now being taken after the channel level here. So you're going to hear these changes in your aux. And so typically what you would do in that scenario is you would come into your aux mixer and you would just set all of the actual aux faders to unity, which is essentially indicative of no change in signal. So we're taking our signal directly from the main mix channel level, right? And with these all set to unity. And if you wanted to do that, we can either come in here and dial them all up to unity manually, or by assigning this option to our user button, now I can simply run through the whole mix and I can select and punch every single one up to unity, and I can create this functionality more swiftly here. Missed my first bank. So just like that. So that's a nice function of the user buttons there. All right, we're gonna move on in just a minute here. The last thing on the user buttons, which is really, really handy if you are using the delay effects, is our tap tempo option here. So if you're using a delay, just to show you, I'll go into my effects real quick here and I'll find a delay. Let's take my effects mutes off. Here's mono delay. Okay. We have a tap tempo option here, and tap tempo is very, very commonly used to set the tempo of a delay, because a lot of the times you want the tempo of the delay to be whatever the tempo of your song is, either in quarter notes or eighth notes. And so easiest way to set that up is to actually have a button or a control that allows you to manually tap whatever your tempo is. To engage that from the effect itself, you would hit that button and it puts it on the wheel here. So now I can just tap whatever my tempo is on the wheel and it sets my tempo for my delay. But you do have to be in that screen for that to work. So as soon as I exited my effect screen there, that's no longer pulsating. I can do that. I can keep that functionality on my board at any time by assigning it to a user button. And so I think that was effects 1, mono delay, tap tempo, and I want this to be, I'll put that on user 1. We'll reassign user 1 from that 0 option. Effects 1, assign, and now watch. So now that button is blinking. It's blinking the tempo of the mono delay that I have in my effects 1. And so anytime I need to reset my tempo, I can do so from anywhere I need to on the board. So as my song's changing tempos, whatever I need to do, if I need to reset this, I can do that right there. You can also do the same thing on the iPad. So if you've got an iPad with you, or if you're in a mixing kind of doing your own self mix from the stage and you're one of the artists, you can have that option right on the iPad for you if you want to be changing out your delay tempo time. Cool. All right, so that takes care of the user buttons and of course the 0 button. I'm going to reset this here so it's not blinking the entire time. All right, now I want to talk about some sort of user button extensions, so to speak, and this is going to be the MIDI functionality. So if I go into menu again and then hit MIDI, I get to this screen, which looks identical to the user button setup screen. That's more or less what it is. And so what this option is if you have an external USB or MIDI to USB controller, like a foot switch type of thing, you can connect it to one of the USB ports in the TouchMix, and you can assign user button controls to your MIDI foot switch. So you can have an extension of user controlled parameters on a foot switch, or if you have additional things that you want to do with it. Or if you don't have access to the board, maybe you're actually performing on stage and you just want to have a foot pedal switch that you can activate a couple of controls with, we have this option. I think probably the most common one is something I talked about a little bit, which is this effects mute option here. So I did mention on the board there is this effects mute button, which is on the board. It's very common to have that control or have a need for that control on a foot switch in front of you. So if you're a vocalist or a guitar player, you have a little foot switch in front of you that you can mute all of your effects at any point, which is handy if you're addressing the audience in between songs and you don't want the massive delay and reverb effects on your voice as you're talking to people. So you can kill all the effects by hitting that button, and then you can punch them back in when the next song begins. And to set this up, it's nearly identical to setting up a user button. So I would take, well, I'm going to unassign that one because I already set it up. But I have all the same options. The menu is exactly the same. You have all the same options here. So if we go to mute and I go toggle mute group and I select effects mute, and then I would hit this assign button, just exactly like a user button. There is one more step, however. Once I've assigned the function to the MIDI slot, we have to teach our actual physical control what to do with it. And so what we do then, we say learn MIDI, and you get this. It's just going to say waiting for incoming MIDI message. At that point, you've got your controller connected, and whatever control on that board you want to assign to that function, you just hit it. At that point, it'll learn that MIDI note and assign it to that functionality. So moving forward, every time you hit that, it will engage whatever this assignment is. So the MIDI option is really, really handy. And that's it. So those are the sort of the customizable, the custom controls that we have as options on the mixer here. So okay, now I'm going to jump into a few other options that we have when we're dealing with scene and preset recall. So if we do have the option, obviously, to create and save custom presets and custom scenes and be able to recall those. But a couple of things happen inherently when you do recall these things. And if you don't want the entirety of something to be altered when you recall a scene or a preset, we do have some options for that. The first of which that I'm going to show you is called channel safe. Now this is a really, really handy thing if you need this functionality. It's kind of a very specific use case, but when you need it, you're really happy that it's here. And that is located here. So again, in my menu screen, just anytime you want to get this screen, you press menu, and you can come into your channel safe options. So what this does is anything that's selected in here, if I select input 1, that will remove that specific channel from being affected when a scene is recalled. So again, a scene is going to reconfigure the entire mixer based on the parameters that it was saved with. If I have a channel or a couple of channels that I want to be left alone, I know I'm going to be maybe changing a couple of scenes throughout my event or whatever's happening, but I have some specific channels that I don't want to change, I can use this option to mark those as safe, so to speak. And so now with those selected, anytime I recall a new scene, those are left alone. And it's very simple to operate, and it's a very simple kind of process to get to. The other way that you can utilize this is actually from within the channels themselves. So if I hit home to get back out to my channels, if I go into an input on the setup screen here, I have, where am I looking? Am I on wrong screen? Overview, channel safe. I'm just not looking at it here.
In the middle.
In the middle. Boom. I knew it. I knew I was going crazy. Yeah, right here. Thanks, Golden. Bam, right there. So it's marked safe, and now it is recallable. Boom, right there. And whoops, wrong button. And so now that I've engaged it within the channel itself, now I can see it reflected there. Now if I hit number 2 here and go check out number 2, you can see it's marked safe in there. So it's the same control in 2 different places. And so this can be really handy. A couple of scenarios which this could be used would be within a bar, nightclub, or a small to medium sized venue that you're a dedicated guy mixing in front of house, and you've configured a few scenes during sound check because you have multiple acts going on maybe. So you have 1 or 2 bands and you kind of create a couple of different scenes for these different bands. But you might want to mark a few of the channels safe, particularly possibly the vocal channel, because maybe you don't want that to be affected by scene change. Like, for example, the reason why you wouldn't want that to happen is during your sound check, you've got it kind of dialed in, the levels kind of dialed in, but you're doing each band individually, right? So you have one scene for one guy, another scene for another guy, another scene for a third guy. And you get through your first act, you get into the second act, and maybe you've made some changements, some adjustments to that vocal channel, throughout the performance that were a little bit different than sound checked. And then when you go to your next scene, some of those parameters you don't want to be affected, particularly maybe as simple as the channel fader level itself, or maybe some of the effects levels that you've placed on that fader. So things like that, you might not want to be affected when you are going to have to be going through different scenes. You want everything else to be reconfigured, but maybe that one channel or those couple of channels you want to be left alone. It's also very common when you're doing performance theater and things like that to be able to mark certain channels safe. Using scenes as a way of kind of moving your performance forward and reconfiguring the board for different acts and different scenes and things like that is very common. But you probably have a couple of microphones for some of your performers that you don't want to be affected at all when you're punching through these different scenes. So that channel safe feature is really advantageous for scenarios and situations like that. So there you go, that's your channel safe. Additionally, if you want a little more granular control of your different options when you're recalling things, there are some other options, both when recalling scenes and recalling presets. And these are called omit from recall options. And you'll find these on the bottom of these screens here. So on our scenes screen, we have our omit options down here. There are 3 of them. We have omit levels, omit outputs, and omit routing. So what this will do is essentially, if I engage omit levels and recall a scene, it won't change any of my fader levels. So regardless of what my fader levels were at when I saved whatever scene I'm going to recall, if the current fader mix is something that I want to keep working with, but I want the rest of the mixer to be changed to whatever that scene had configured, I can select this option here, recall the scene, and my faders are left alone. Omit outputs is dealing with your output processing. So if you've configured, your main output, maybe you've tuned the room, or maybe you've kind of just placed a nice, not like this, but if you've placed a nice kind of curve on your output there, or maybe you have some limiting going on and you've kind of set up your output and you know that works for the room and it's going to continue to work throughout the event. But you still have different scenes that you've saved and you need to be kind of scrolling through and you don't want your output here to be affected at all. Very simple, you just engage that option there and it leaves all your output processing alone. And then we have our routing option here, which will deal with the patch matrix, which we'll get into in a second, and aux routing and subgroup and DCA routing and things like that. So again, just a couple of things that you can omit from scene recalls if you've worked these things out and you need to be able to keep them the way they are, but everything else in the scene you need to be changed out. You can do that here. And then we have the same type of options in presets. If I go to my preset screen here, we have these omit options down here. They're a little bit different when we're talking about presets. And again, a channel preset is just going to reconfigure a single channel on the mixer. These options are omit levels and assignments, so very similar. This is going to deal with the channel fader level and any group assignments that it has been made. So if I've already kind of set my fader level where I want it, and maybe I've assigned this channel to a DCA or a subgroup or something like that here, but I want to swap out the rest of the channel configuration. I want to recall something and get a new EQ curve and maybe a different compressor setting and things like that. I can select that omit levels and assignments there, and recall the preset, and it will leave those parameters alone. I also have an omit name option. So when you do recall a preset, it will rename the preset based on what that preset is. If I've already named my channel and then the channel name is applicable to what I need it to be, and I want that name to stay, I can engage omit name, and it won't affect that. And then I can omit phantom assignments. So if I've got a condenser microphone plugged in and I've already set my phantom power to on, or maybe a couple of the presets, a couple of our factory presets specifically are expecting a condenser microphone to be connected, so they're going to turn phantom power on. If I don't want my phantom power to be affected one way or the other, I can hit that option there, and phantom power is left alone when you recall the preset. So those are the assignment buttons there. Those are really, really handy and can really just gives you more control of what changes on the channels and on the mixer when you start recalling these different parameters. So it's very, very nice to be able to take advantage of those and to be aware of them. Okay, so I already mentioned this next topic briefly, but I'm going to give you a little more insight onto what the cue is here. So the Q8, as I mentioned, is a way that you can kind of monitor what's happening on the mixer from the control position. So there is an output specifically, and let's see if I can actually capture this in my camera. I can't. If you have a mixer in front of you, if you're looking at this, there will be a 1/4 inch TRS output labeled Q. On the 8 and the 16, that is going to be above your wheel and your button cluster. You'll see there's a little input and output section above there where you've got a number of 1/4 inch connectors. So one of those will be labeled Q, and if you connect some headphones to that, you can cue channels here and listen to what's happening on those channels in your headphones. Additionally, there is another output labeled monitor. On the 8 and the 16, this Q option will send that channel to both of those outputs simultaneously. So you can use one or the other or both. And the way that you activate them, I can show you this, is there's two buttons here. There's a phones button and a monitor button. So if you want to engage the Q, or if you're listening to your Q option, you hit the phones button here, and that brings up this fader on the screen so you can dial up that level output for that and listen to what's happening on those channels. And you can cue individual inputs, individual outputs, or any combination thereof. And just kind of take a listen to what's happening on the channel. Now, by default, the Q will be set to pre-fader, which means it is not taking in the actual channel level fader into consideration. So when you cue that channel, you're listening to it from right before the fader level. So you're listening to the input level plus, the EQ and dynamic section, and then it gives it to you at that point without listening to the actual fader level. So you're listening to everything on the channel up to its mix fader level. If you want to switch that to post fader, you can. You can come into the menu and you can go into mixer setup, and you have the Q pickoff option here, which has two options, PFL and AFL. PFL, pre-fader level, AFL, after fader level. And typically this control is called pre and post fader, but using the acronym here, PFL, it would be the same thing, pre and post. So both start with P, so we went with AFL for after fader level here. And all you do is engage that. So I toggle that over. Now I'm actually listening. When I cue a channel, I'm actually listening to what this fader is doing, and I can hear the effect of this changing. Likewise, so a couple things that are different on the 30 here. So the phones and the monitor are essentially the same thing on the 8 and the 16. The monitor system here is a little bit different on the 30, and you do have a dedicated stereo XLR outputs for the monitor output here. And if you hit this monitor button here on the TouchMix 30, you get this. We covered this in detail in the TouchMix 30 to DAW webinar last week. So I'm not going to go too deep into it. But essentially, in this option, it allows you to listen to any of your aux outputs or your main left and right output directly, or the Q. So if I leave it on Q here, now that means that anything, and then there's your level, obviously, for that output. Now anything that I've got queued here will be directed to that monitor output. And so if you're in a recording environment and this is in your control room, this is your recording desk, that is a really helpful feature to be able to just have your control room monitors connected to the monitor output, and then you can kind of direct the output, any of the signal you need to of the board to those outputs and listen to that at any given time. So that's pretty nice. The other thing that the TouchMix 30 can do, as opposed to the Index 16, is it actually has an entirely different mode for your cue system. And this is called Solo in Place. So if I go into Menu, and if I go to Mixer Setup, I have this option up here. It is called Solo in Place. If I turn that on and confirm that I want to do that, now I can see that is on. Back out on my main mix. Now all these buttons are kind of orange reddish, and they have an SIP indication in them instead of cue. SIP is for Solo in Place. Now what this button is actually doing, it is actively soloing any channel that that's selected on in the main output. So instead of just directing it to a secondary cue output to be monitored discreetly, where anybody listening to the main output mix is not going to hear that you're listening to that. Now, in the main output, I can solo channels. So that is a whole nother feature and function of the cue system on the TouchMix 30, and that can be used in a number of scenarios. In sound check, it can be very helpful to have this feature if you want to quickly just kind of be soloing out different channels in the main mix to address problems quickly and things like that. If you are using this in a live scenario, it's very, very, you need to pay attention. You need to realize that this is on, because if you accidentally hit that, if you hit that at any time and you don't remember that it is in this mode, it was another reason why we turn the buttons red when we engage with this mode, is because if your performance is happening and you hit one of those buttons, now that channel is soloed in the main mix and everyone's going to be like, what the heck is happening? So might be a good idea to reset that before your event. You might not need it during an active performance or an event, whatever you're mixing. But that is another option. It is also, that specific option is also really helpful, again, in a recording environment. So if you're using the TouchMix 30 Pro with a DAW in a recording control room, that feature can help to isolate channels and things like that in that environment. So that is Solo in Place. We talked about monitor. Now I'm going to talk about two things. I know we're getting real close here. I'll try to go as fast as I can. I've got two more features that I want to get to here. The first of which is our talkback and noise option. So this, from the main mix, if I go back into menu here, I hit talkback, and that brings me to this menu. So there is a dedicated talkback input here. Actually, I have a mic connected to mine. It won't matter because we're not listening to it at all, but I did it just for the formality here. But essentially what this does is if you have a microphone from the mix position, from behind the mixer itself, I can connect a microphone to my talkback channel. And now I have the option of sending that microphone to any of the aux outputs or the main output. So if I want to direct my microphone to somebody's stage wedge and talk to them, I can do that. And I can spin the level up here and I can hit enable. And now I'm talking to that, for whoever's listening to aux 1, I'm talking to them. You've got a phantom power option here, so if you connect a condenser microphone to that, you can engage that if you need to. So this is a really helpful option, and you can select more than one output, or you can send yourself to the main outputs. You actually can see that if I spin myself up. There we go. Hey, 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 hey. Very cool. So yeah, so if you need a voice of God mic, or if you just need to be addressing your performers through their monitors, this is a great option to do that. You also see here, you have your effects master outputs as well. So if you toggle the main and any one of these effects, you can actually use your control microphone to sort of audition the effects or kind of get a feel for what these effects sound like through your own voice. And so you can kind of step in and out of these and take a listen to what these are doing, and if give you an idea of how they're going to sound. So that's kind of a cool use for the talkback channel. The talkback channel is also used for the room tuning feature. So if you're using that feature, that input, that microphone input, is where you're going to be connecting that microphone, your measurement microphone, for that feature. But this is the other use for that input. Additionally, on this screen, you have a noise generator. So not only can I direct a microphone signal to any of my outputs, I can turn on my pink noise and deliver pink noise to any of my outputs. So if you need to do quick line checks of your system, you can come in here and you can activate your pink noise generator, and you can send pink noise to anywhere in the system you need it to go. So another really useful feature here. And then you do have, just to close us off here with this, there is a button right here above the wheel called Talkback. So you do not have to be in this screen to activate your microphone. You do need to be in here to be directing it to where you want to go. But if you just leave it on your main outputs, or if you know you want to be primarily talking through one of the auxes, you leave it here on this screen, and then from anywhere else on the board, anytime you press and hold this button, it is opening that microphone channel for you. And this is a push to talk button. So you do have to be actively pressing the button for the channel to be open, and then when you let go, it closes the channel. In the menu itself, in the screen itself, this is latch. So if I just want to open the channel and keep it on until I disengage it, I can do that right there. So that is our Talkback feature. All right, we're going to close this off here with the patch matrix. And this is a feature that is exclusive to the TouchMix 30 Pro, but can be really helpful in a couple of scenarios. I'm going to open it here. That is, again, one of the items found in the menu. And I'm going to select patch matrix on the screen, and that takes us here. So what the patch matrix is doing is it is allowing us to reroute any of our physical inputs to any of our channels on the mixer itself. So if I just need to straight reroute something, I can do that. It also gives the ability to molt channels, what we call molting. So if I want to direct a single input signal to more than one channel on the mixer itself to maybe be processed differently, I can do that as well. And it's very simple to operate. I can select an input here. I've got, so all my inputs here, I got 1 through 16 there. And if I hit that green arrow 17 through 30, I can access the remainder of my inputs up to 30. And go back, and then likewise, I've got all of my channels here. I've got 1 through 16 and then 17 through 30, which are going to be found over here. There we are. There they are. Okay. So as a quick, simple example, let's go back here. I want 1 through 16. If I just wanted to redirect input 1 to input 8, I select input 1 and I select input 8, and it's done. So, but now you can see it is not only going to input 8, but it is still also going to 1. So the signal that is being input to my mixer through input 1 is going to channel 1 here, and is also going to channel 8. So in this scenario, what I'm doing is molting, and this allows me to do a couple of things. Primarily, process a singular signal a couple of different ways. And a couple of reasons you might want to do this, a couple of scenarios I can give you are, if you want to use, man, it's another fire engine. It's Friday, it's blowing up today. If I've got, let's say I've got an effect, there's a particular sort of part of a song, and the vocalist wants to put like a telephone effect on their voice. I can do this using the patch matrix. If I have an open channel somewhere in my mix, I can redirect or molt his channel to an unused channel, apply my processing to get the telephone effect there, and keep that muted until that section of the song comes up, and then I unmute that channel and mute his main channel. Now he's got the effect for that section of the song, and then when that section moves on, I mute that again and unmute his main channel. That's just a loose example. Another example would be if you have an instrument like an acoustic guitar, which can be a little more challenging to get to sit well in a mix. But you've got it dialed in and it sounds really nice and clean and good out of the main PA. And then you give that signal to that performer's monitor wedge, and they don't like the way it sounds for whatever reason. You got a couple options. You can compromise with them. You can kind of find a medium ground between what they want to hear and what sounds okay out of the PA. Or you can come into the patch matrix and you reroute his channel. So you got a guitar channel here. It's going out to the mains here. You reroute it to an unused channel here. And then on that channel, what did I say, 8? I come into the setup screen and I unassign that channel from the main output. So now that second channel that's got that signal is not going to the PA. Now I can take this channel and I can just direct it to their monitor mix there. And then I can go in and I can process it however they want to hear it. So everybody's happy. So he's happy, he or she's happy with what they want to hear in their monitor. You still got it dialed in. It sounds really good in the PA. Everyone's happy. So that's a nice use case for molting in the patch matrix. Another one that I think is really cool, and as a little, there's a couple of different ways to get the same effect, but one of the things that you could do is doing something very similar in the patch matrix. You molt a channel. So let's say we've got a vocal channel or maybe a couple of vocal channels, and you want to thicken it a little bit and give it maybe almost a doubling effect. You molt it to a second channel, and then on that second channel, you apply a little bit of time delay, just a little bit. And so by slightly delaying, and both signals are still going to the main output. So you're getting the original signal and then an identical signal that is just slightly delayed. And so it's going to give you a little bit of it's going to mess with the phase just a little bit, and it's going to have this nice kind of thickening effect. And then of course you do have an independent level control of that. So you can kind of blend that up, underneath that main channel and kind of get it to sit well and have that nice, cool, almost doubling effect. So that's a nice use case for the patch matrix there. And then obviously, if I want to simply just swap inputs, so instead of multing here, you can see now that I've assigned input 1 to channel 8, the physical input 8 is doing nothing. So it is not doing anything. So I can reassign 8 to somewhere else, or I can simply swap them. So if I select 8 and 1, now I've just swapped physical inputs 1 and 8 with 1 and 8 on the screen there. So you can do that. So whatever your scenario might be, where you might need to be kind of rerouting your channels. Maybe you're doing a festival and something goes wrong on stage. A cable goes out, or an input on your snake goes out, or something like that, and you can't physically get up there to repatch things. You can come into the patch matrix and temporarily kind of just reroute things in the mixer to get the next act going, and then later you can go and address the physical problem. So this is a nice tool that can kind of be used creatively. It can also be used to solve problems and things like that throughout your performance. And then when you're done using this, or if you need to clear out all of these assignments at any point, there is a reset button, which can be your best friend when using this tool, because as helpful as it can be, it can also become a rabbit hole. So you do want to be aware of what you're assigning if you're using this tool. And at any point, if you want to just clear everything out and reset everything, there is a really nice button right here called reset. If I just hit that, I can hit reset there. Come on, it's thinking about it. There we go. And it's reset and everything's back to normal. So that is the patch matrix, and that will kind of conclude the little feature set that I wanted to get us through for this presentation. Are there any questions, comments, concerns? Where are the fire trucks going? What's happening?
It was a pretty straightforward one. There hasn't been much going on in the Q&A.
Cool.
It was good, Jason.
Okay. Yeah, good. I hope that was helpful. An honorable mention, I think here would be our security feature as well. This is something that can be really useful. It allows you to just set up different levels of passwords. So if you want to restrict access to the mixer either entirely and set a password so people can't get in other than you, or if you have a couple of people that might be operating it that are of varied skill levels, you have the option of setting different passwords to kind of allow them restricted access. Maybe you just want to give somebody the ability to ride faders. Maybe you want somebody to be able to only operate the mixer in simple mode, and so on and things like that. So there are a couple of other options here and things that you can turn on and off, features you can turn on and off, and set different passwords to restrict access like that. So that'll be a nice little honorable mention for our cool feature set here. Otherwise, that'll do it for today. And if there are no questions, then I just want to thank everyone for stopping by and checking this out. I hope I showed you something new. I hope you learned something. I hope you got something valuable out of this. Maybe kind of, if you have a mixer, take it out and maybe check some of these out on your own and start playing with these features, because they really, really can elevate your workflow and whatever you're doing, whether you're recording or mixing bands, or you're front of house at a venue, or you're doing corporate stuff. A lot of these tools can be very advantageous to a lot of different scenarios. So cool. I guess I'll leave us with that. Thank you once again. Keep an eye out for the recording for this, as well as the last few. I think the last one we still need to get up, and so we'll get those out this afternoon. I'll try to get those out this afternoon. So cool. Okay. Then thanks for stopping by.